This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. How do you go about monitoring and tracking the work that you've accomplished as an implementer of humanitarian aid or development assistance? This question has been answered thousands of times by hundreds of organizations around the world. Even though we're in the year 2016, the reality of tracking progress for the vast majority of initiatives out there is one of two things: written reports in Microsoft Word or numbers on an Excel spreadsheet that then get translated into a narrative report in Word. I'm not kidding. I've been evaluating programming in this world for more than 10 years, and I have yet to be hired for an assignment where, as a very first step, my client sends me a username and password for their online information management system that has the ability to instantly report on total program progress with a complete package of visualization and analytical tools. It's just not out there yet. This isn't to say that, of course, it doesn't exist. In fact, when I first cut my teeth in development with a large NGO way back in the early 2000s, they already had built an internal web-based monitoring system. And I've seen a bunch of flavors of the same type of thing in organizations around the globe since. But for some reason, even though there have been countless attempts at making this process better at the project level, we still revert back to spreadsheets and reports. Herb Caudill is on a mission to change all of that. As my guest today for the 104th episode of Terms of Reference, the founder of DevResults thinks we might finally be at a stage where data, connectivity, and capacity are all at levels that real-time project analysis and management is possible. Herb loves to make elegant and efficient systems that solve real-world problems. He's a data visualization geek, a graphic designer, and a programmer. He started out building websites and software for international development organizations like USAID, the World Bank, GIZ, DFID, the World Resources Institute, and Chemonics. Herb grew up in Latin America and worked in Africa for 5 years, first teaching high school and math with the Peace Corps, and then working on internet connectivity initiatives with USAID. Today, DevResults is used to manage more than $3 billion worth of foreign assistance. I spoke with Herb in Barcelona. Hello, Herb. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Hey, my pleasure.
Tell us where you're sitting today.
I am on the 9th floor of a building in Barcelona, Spain.
Nice. So it's April in Spain. I guess it's not the same as April in Paris, but
yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful weather here. It's dry and warm and sunny.
Everything that you want.
Yeah, beat it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to connect with you. You are the founder of an organization called DevResults that does some pretty awesome forward-thinking stuff, data metrics work in the development space. Why don't we start by you tell us about that company, and you give us the explanation about what it is that you guys do.
Sure. So DevResults is a web-based application for managing international development projects. It's something that's been around for about 5 years now commercially. It's a software as a service product. The customers for DevResults include USAID missions, USAID contractors, and a handful of other implementers of various sorts that are outside of the U.S. foreign aid universe. So a handful of European and World Bank projects as well. So
give me a little more detail about what specifically is that you provide for, let's just say a large development project for, they're a large NGO or something like that. What could they expect from you, and why do you think it makes a difference?
So the challenge that most development projects face at whatever scale it is, whether it's, an agency level or an international NGO headquarters or an NGO implementing a donor project or a donor office in one country. Everybody has kind of the same set of, or rather they have a common set of challenges that include that all revolve around just being able to see what they're tasked with, how the work is being done, and what the effects of the work is. So what the outputs and outcomes of their project are. So there's two parts of it. One is just staying on top of things internally, and then the other is having data that's reported to you. So if you're an organization and you have other organizations that you're working with, and they need to keep you up to date with what they're doing, and then presumably a development project's money has come from somewhere, from a donor or a funder of some sort, and they need to report to that funder what it is that they're accomplishing. And so the software just sort of gives them one place to keep track of all of that information and streamlines the whole process of getting information into the organization and out of it.
So, most of us who are listening to or most of the people listening to this podcast, they're familiar with quarterly reporting. They're familiar with some of the struggles of getting out in the field, collecting data, and then putting it into a place for reporting. How does DevResults either make that easier, or are there dashboards, visualizations, or special? Is there a special way that you go about it that defines you or separates you from the pack of other organizations?
The first thing that we do is about just streamlining that whole process. So the traditional way in which reporting happens between an implementer and the donor, or really just between any two organizations, where you have this sort of relationship where money is flowing in one direction and information is flowing in the other direction. The current model involves the implementer sending quarterly reports, like you say, or semi-annual reports or annual reports that have traditionally just been in Microsoft Word form or PDF form, or in the best of circumstances, in a Word document with Excel attachment, something like that, where the data is actually structured. But the typical scenario involves the donor just receiving a whole bunch of PDFs that are then just filed away and kind of just check off a box that says, yes, they've submitted their quarter 3 report, as opposed to actually becoming actionable, for that. So what should be happening is that all of the information coming into any organization should be aggregated and made analyzable. And that's what our software does. So if you have, for example, an organization that is doing vaccination in an African country, for example, and you have 5 different local NGOs that are kind of coordinating the work in different parts of the country, and they're providing you with statistics on how many kids or how many people they're vaccinating quarter by quarter. What you want is to be able to take all that information and all the associated dimensions of that information, demographics, gender, and so on, and aggregate that together and be able to sort of compare apples to apples and say, okay, well, this is what's happening in this province, or this is what we're getting for the money between these two different organizations. And in the current model, that just doesn't happen. That's kind of the idea behind the reporting, is to hold people accountable and also to have data for management. But in practice, there's so much friction involved in just getting the information out of these written reports and putting it in a format that can then be put next to information from another implementer, that it just doesn't happen because it's just such a it's just so labor intensive, such a nuisance. So what we do is we have just ways of streamlining that whole process so that when you need people to report to you, you can open up a reporting window. They can submit the data in a structured form. It all automatically gets put in the same place and structured the same way so that you can then analyze that data internally. You can see what the trends are. You can then also report upwards to whoever's providing you with money. So if you're a USAID mission, you need to report to USAID headquarters. If you're a large project in a single country, you need to report to your donor, and so on.
So yeah, I was just going to say, you just described an ecosystem, right? So DevResults would be ideally the ecosystem that would be probably chosen by the mission, and then would that be then trickled down to each of the project implementers, or do then they have to also select that, or is it or is it just sort of some open source interface that they can use whatever system they want and it goes into the DevResults system?
Internally, whoever's reporting to you doesn't need to be using DevResults. Obviously, it's simpler in certain ways if they are, but we can't make any kind of assumptions. We can't sort of force that entire ecosystem to use a single platform.
I mean, that would be awesome for your business, but
it'd be awesome for the business,
or not. I don't know.
We're not trying to create a monopoly. What we want what we would like to see is to see open standards out there for people to use the same formats, but to be able to choose the software product that works best for them. So it's really a matter of having common language as opposed to forcing everybody to standardize on a single platform.
So do you think that DevResults, I know that I've seen your story online, I've heard about it from my colleagues. I love hearing about sort of the evolution, the sort of how, an idea turns into what is now a company and a force in the industry. Do you think that it came from the need for better analytics, the need for better reporting? I mean, because it sounds to me like what you're trying to do is essentially move from the what is essentially the CYA activity of we've got to write our quarterly report and send it into the donor to let's actually create a system where we can see things happening in essentially real time, as real time as things get. Why don't you take it from there? How did I do a good characterization?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would love to see, I would love to move away from the CYA use case.
I try to call a spade on this show. I've been in the business long enough.
That's absolutely what's going on, and that's so far the adoption of DevResults is almost entirely motivated by people's reporting requirements, right? So there's contractual requirements. This isn't the implementer's fault. They've been told how and when.
Sure, and if we didn't have it, nobody would report it. I mean, that was the problem of the 70s and 80s, right?
Right. So the reporting thing is a necessary thing. It does sort of, there is a tension between the need to report and this sort of broader business intelligence need, for organizations to be able to have situational awareness of what they're accomplishing and where their challenges are and where they might need to adjust course. I can tell you that almost nobody right now is actually using the software in that way, and that's I understand completely the reasons why that's the case. We would like to sort of get rid of the obstacles that are there that prevent people from having live actionable data. In the meantime, the problem of just the reporting problem alone is a huge problem and really, frankly, an unsolved problem in this industry. I mean, that's kind of the dirty little secret of monitoring and evaluation is that nobody's really doing it.
Oh, believe you me, you're speaking to the choir here. I know that. So have you preempted my next question? Is that would have been, is there an organization? I know you probably can't name names with your clients and whatnot, where an organization has implemented DevResults, it's out there, it's working, and either a management decision or data came in, they're like, oh, holy crap, we need to actually be doing it in this county instead of that county, or, we're finding that, wait, actually, we're much more efficient than we thought we were, or something like that.
I would love to have a story like that to tell you at this point. But the fact is that, the sort of the most exciting thing that I can tell you is you have organizations where this used to be a huge pain in the ass, and it's no longer a huge pain in the ass, and it's that's something. That's absolutely something, and frankly, one of the big challenges that we see out there is that you have the International Aid Transparency Initiative, where you have basically every large donor in the world has committed to making information about development assistance public. And that's happening with the financial part of the information about what's being done. So you have
money. It's easier to get say where our money flow is going and what's happening with the money.
Yeah,
but you're saying then you want to take it to the action items that once you gave that money, what happened to it?
Well, yeah, the International Aid, EADI, the Transparency Initiative has as one of its priorities to include that kind of information, so that because if you know that $500,000 went to this organization in this country, you really don't know very much. Just by knowing that, you can do your own sort of digging if you're an investigative journalist and say, oh well, I don't see those schools, but there's no sort of structured way of doing any kind of comparisons with what results are out there. How many kids country by country are being immunized against typhoid. Well, who knows? You'd have to go, and people do this. The World Bank does this. People do this. Go out there and collect this information kind of independently. But all of that information could be bundled with the financial information so that you can say, all right, well, this amount of money went out this year, and then over the next 5 years, here's what happened. That's the dream of the International Aid Transparency Initiative. That's what needs to happen. People should, taxpayers should know where their money is going. Stakeholders in the host countries should know what's going on in their own countries. I mean, the governments of countries receiving development assistance should know, who's doing what and what the results of those efforts are. But you have such a complicated web of money flowing, down or out in this really complex network of actors, and then information flowing in the opposite direction. And it's, at each stage, the challenge of taking information from a bunch of different actors and aggregating it together and then sending that up the chain in some sort of aggregatable way, it just defeats everybody.
Well, I was just going to say, as you're painting this picture, at first I thought I was going to ask the smart question of, okay, so you're implementing typhoid vaccinations in Botswana over here, and you're also doing it in, Chad over here, you're doing it in Vietnam over here. You could do a comparative analysis of why was one more efficient than the other, why was there better uptake in another place, those kinds of things. Right. But then when you kept, you sort of kept going down the chain, I thought, okay, so aid gives to missions, missions give to implementers, implementers give to subcontractors, subcontractors give to consultants, consultants get, implement work. Just the complexity of bringing this, finding a vacuum cleaner that can bring this data back and aggregate in some way, truly overwhelming. Are you basically just, trying to take little sort of bite-sized chunks of that and bring that aggregation together? Is that what DevResults' sort of vision is for the future, or is there something else there?
Well, there's several pieces of the puzzle that DevResults makes easier. Like I said, just the actual process. There's the logistics of receiving that information from a variety of different actors and putting it together and then sending it up the chain. That's a problem that requires software. It doesn't require software because it can be done with just a lot of elbow grease and effort. And that's the way that it's done in way too many organizations, is you just have, somebody receiving a bunch of Word documents and then retyping that information into another Word document. Or hopefully a spreadsheet, but then
it's Word
documents.
It's definitely Word documents.
Yeah, so that's that's kind of the state of play right now. It's just this enormously labor-intensive, slow, error-prone process that would never be tolerated, in a chain of convenience stores, and let alone, this is kind of the current state of the art in what is it, a $1.5 trillion industry worldwide, right? I mean, it's not. It's just
embarrassing, is what it is.
So far from the way that things ought to be, and I mean, the reason why it's that way is because there's not really any strong incentives for that information to be aggregated. So if you're a chain of convenience stores, then you get more money if you know that you're out of Diet Coke in Topeka. That's good information and information that's going to make you money. Whereas in this world, you kind of have to just tell people what to do and hope that they do it in order to get that information back. And so you just don't have sort of built-in incentives that you have in the business world, and that's understandable. It's not business; it's a different world. But still, it's if we are going to get to the point where I, as a taxpayer, can ask of my government, you supposedly spent X amount of dollars on school construction around the world. So what happened with that money? That's a very reasonable question.
So you're sitting here now, you're DevResults, you're implementing a solution. What's the next 5 years look like? Do you see other actors coming into this space? I'm sure there are other actors out there doing similar implementations. Maybe not. Maybe you have a completely unique solution. Right. But what's the next 5 years look like for you for breaking this, for continuing to disrupt? Is it more of the same? Is it, let's get DevResults implemented in more and more missions and more implementers around the world? Or are there new things coming down the pike that you're able to tell us about?
Well, I think you're definitely going to see more organizations internally losing patience with the copy and paste from Excel into Word sort of method of transmitting information and start to put in place software solutions. And the main thing that I would hope for, obviously I'd love for everybody to use DevResults, but as a second best, I would just love for everybody to stop building systems from scratch to do this, because it's a solved problem. It's not really that different from one organization to another. You don't, so the idea that every NGO, or even, all 100 projects of an NGO should each have its own information system for managing this kind of information is just bonkers. And so it's a change that's already happening. Most of when we first started out, pretty much all of the requests that we got were for people to build them a custom system. And we said, well, how about, you pay us a lot less money and we rent you an existing system. And that's always been kind of, okay, I guess we could do that kind of thing up until now. Now it's becoming more of a, we're seeing more requests for proposals, or just more requests that are coming out that presuppose that there's an existing software solution that just needs to be configured for them to use it. So that's a very welcome change. I imagine that trend will continue. I certainly hope so. Just the amount of reinvention of the wheel in this particular space has just been astonishing. Number of projects that get, along with their budget from USAID, there's a line item, for $2 million to build a database to keep track of this stuff. And so they start to build a system to keep track of this stuff. And about halfway through the 5-year project, they've kind of got a, kind of workable system. And then at the end of the project, they throw all of that software away. And that's just heartbreaking to see over and over.
You're giving me heartburn just thinking about that. I didn't realize it was that deep. You talked about the EITI. What are the other disruptions that you've seen in the monitoring and evaluation, data analytics, data visualization, this area over the last 2 or 3 years? What are you most excited about, or what's been made the most change?
Well, so EITI has one of the big contributions, just a really sort of core piece of that initiative has been, in addition to getting all of, sort of badgering all of these countries to come around the table and say, yes, okay, we'll publish our information. They've also defined the format in which that information is to be published. And that's just an enormous contribution that I think goes way beyond just sort of the donor reporting piece of the puzzle. It wasn't so it's an XML format that is fairly straightforward. It's just a way of stating in a machine readable form and in a comparable form what you're doing, where the money's going, who it's going to, what it's being spent for, and hopefully eventually what's being accomplished with that money. That format can also be used as an interchange format. It wasn't really intended for that. It was really just kind of a last mile thing for getting the information from the World Bank, from USAID, from DFID, from the European donors to this central database where then taxpayers can go and analyze that and make comparisons for it. That's what it was intended for, but it is really the only possible solution that I can see to this very error-prone setup that we have right now. So if I'm doing work for USAID in Mozambique, I should be able to just report to USAID Mozambique in EITI form. They take that data, put it up against other data that they're getting in EITI from other implementers, and then report it out in EITI form to the world in general, just to the world at large. All of these reports should just be, sort of automatically public information, so that instead of having a, sort of a very private reporting window in which your implementer sends a document to USAID, you have an implementer that's just sort of putting out for the world to see an XML document that's their Q3 report. USAID takes all of those documents and absorbs them internally, and then puts its own document out that kind of aggregates them in the ways that are interesting to.
And one could even visualize a system where that's essentially just automated, right? That if it's a
Well, absolutely,
if,
yeah.
if an implementer puts it on there, and then it would just aggregate that data automatically, and hey, here's the Mozambique website that you go for.
Right. Yeah. So the key to this puzzle is sort of common data standards that make this information machine readable, and there's a number of pieces to that would need to come into place for that actually to be practical, but it's not rocket science. I mean, it's just,
well,
it's just a matter of...
You say it's not rocket science, but my mind kind of wanders. So when you go to your average implementer, there's still, people at the top of the food chain at these implementers are still not of the data generation, right? In large part. Do you find that that's a big hurdle, or is that still a big remaining hurdle in perhaps the energy, the volume behind this type of initiative? Or do you need a translator when you go to an organization to be able to sell into that organization? That's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah, I guess my experience has been that there's not really like a generation gap with this stuff. The people who've been in this business for a long time are just as frustrated with it as somebody who's just coming into it and is like, are you kidding me? Is this really the way that this
is how it's done?
This works? But yeah, I mean, you have, whether you're a mission director of a USAID mission, or you're the director of a donor, or you're the chief of party for a project in a given country, all of those people come in there and say, I need to know what the hell we're doing. I need to know, I need to just be able to look at something and know, well, our target was to immunize 500 kids this year, and so far we've only immunized 27. Like that kind of information, everybody wants it. Raj Shah, when he came into USAID, he was like, what do you mean you can't tell me how many kids have been immunized by, with US funds in a given year? It's kind of mind-boggling. And so it's not, I think that anybody's expectation, regardless of how long they've been in this business, would be that these are, in this day and age, that those are answerable questions. And the fact of the matter is they're not answerable questions. Like still to this day, USAID cannot really give you an accurate number for how many kids are in refurbished schools, how many people have been housed after disasters, how many people have received food assistance. Well, with that one, probably they can, but there's just so many pieces of what USAID is doing where they just don't know, because you have to just add up lots and lots of little numbers, and that requires, a lot of digging through a lot of incompatible, formats to come up with a number, and it's just not going to happen until it's done in a machine readable way.
At the risk of making this a let's beat on USAID conversation, are there other agencies that do it better? DFID?
Nope.
Canada, Australia? Nope. Nobody. Not even the Scandinavians? They seem to do everything better.
Nope. Yeah, no, I mean, this development data, it's like teenage sex, everybody thinks that everybody else is doing it.
I am absolutely stealing.
Nobody's doing it.
I'm totally stealing that from you immediately. That's awesome.
Anybody that you talk to is under the impression that everybody else is doing it better than them. And we've worked with enough organizations at this point to be able to say pretty confidently, nobody has their shit together on this. Nobody.
That's amazing. Tell us more about inside your organization. So, let's just say you're on the cutting edge. I'm gonna give you that compliment. What about when someone, maybe yourself or one of your employees or one of your clients comes and says, hey, I've got this new idea, or we think we could be done this way. How are those ideas considered, and then how do they find their way into your system? I'm asking, how does innovation happen in your space?
Right. DevResults was originally I was the only developer on the software. And those sort of things were very simple. I would go to a country and work with them to implement DevResults. And as I was working with them, they'd be like, can't you do this? Or, it'd be really cool if you could do this. And, if I thought it was a cool idea, I'd go back and implement it. And that was kind of the process.
Sure. Carte blanche.
As it's become, just as you have more and more people using the software, it becomes impossible to do everything that everybody wants it to do, and we've had to sort of systematize that process. I think any software platform goes through that transition as they mature and grow their customer base and add more people working on the product. We just very recently put Kate Mueller's, who's one of just 3 at this point, sort of implementation experts, data scientists who actually go out into the field and work with organizations to get them up and running with DevResults. She's now kind of officially the product owner, and so she's the person that you have to persuade if you want DevResults to do something that it doesn't do. She's the one that you have to convince that it's actually a good thing and should be a priority. And so, she sort of coordinates the process internally of prioritizing, because that's essentially what it comes down to is, what's the next thing that we're going to work on, or what are the 2 or 3 next things that we're going to work on. And it's really, it's a heartbreakingly difficult thing to do, because there's so many things that, oh yeah, absolutely makes sense. Yeah, absolutely the software should do that. And it's kind of ridiculous that it doesn't, those sort of things. But you can only do what you have the resources to do. And so, we have a great team of engineers. It's little by little growing. Software development always takes time. You can't just throw more people at it and expect it to go faster. Doing it right just involves.
Well, that kind of leads into another one. So let's just say Kate goes out there and discovers either something or somebody makes a suggestion about a new thing. Do you pilot it with just one client? Does it automatically become a part of the hosted system that everybody gets? Or, what's your process for turning it from an idea into a standard piece of the service?
Well, since it's software as a service, the big advantage of software as a service, of course, is that you can upgrade the software continuously. So every few days we'll push out changes, and they just sort of go out to everybody. And the system until recently has just been, stuff gets done, it goes out, and people sort of adapt to it, and complain about it the same way that they complain about, Facebook changing the format of the news feed or what have you. But it's been kind of that sort of process. Now that we have a lot of people using the software, it sort of slows us down in terms of how nimble we can be about making changes. So, in the old days when, there were single digits of organizations using the software, if I decided to change the way that something worked, it was just a matter of changing it and then going to each of those organizations and saying, oh, by the way, used to work this way, and here's where things are now. And of course that doesn't fly once you reach a certain scale. And we've kind of bumped into things where we rolled out changes and all of a sudden we had just moved a whole lot of people's cheese and they were upset, and not that they didn't like the way or that they liked the old way better, but just sort of having things changed without knowing about them in advance and having to redo training materials and stuff like that. So we're starting to be, more deliberate about these things, and we do so just for the first time now. Very recently, we've introduced, it's kind of a beta testing system where DevResults super users, the people who really know the software inside out and who rely on it the most, have a chance to sort of preview new features before they go out to the main code base. But there's only one piece of software facing everyday customers, and so any change that we make has the potential to affect everybody. Now, of course, not everybody is using the same parts of the software as much or at all. Some organizations will say, well, we don't really need that, so they'll turn it off, and so they won't notice if something changes there. But by and large, the differences between people using the software in one organization or another are just differences of configuration. They're all talking to the same servers in the same code base. So we do have to be very careful about changes, make sure that, that as we do things, that they make sense in a really wide variety of contexts, and that's the hard bit.
Yeah, that's definitely a hard bit. Who do you pay attention to in either development space or outside of the development space to keep yourself fresh, to learn about new innovations, new opportunities, cool things that either you want to put into DevResults or maybe will help your clients? Like, are there blogs you watch or podcasts you listen to, other than this one, of course? I
guess I would say, I think one of the problems with the development space is the sort of idea that, that this is a completely different universe from any other field of human endeavor, and nothing from the outside world applies here. And so I guess I'm saying that to preface that mostly I'm following sort of just broader technological trends and just, better ways to do things in general, as opposed to specifically in the development space. Because I think a lot of the problems that we have involve, sort of stem from just assuming that we're the first ones to ever come across the problem of needing to know, for example, what somebody did with our money. Like that's a pretty universal
absolutely
need for organizations. So it's been solved. And obviously we wouldn't exist if there wasn't things about that are very specific to this field. But I think the interesting stuff is primarily happening outside of development as far as technology goes, and it's just a matter of seeing what's out there and figuring out what can be applicable here. I mean, beyond that, it really is just, I mean, my attention is, and I would say sort of our attention as an organization, otherwise sort of beyond just pure technology trends and whatnot, our attention is taken up by our customers and then some. It's all we can do to just keep up with what they're asking for, what they need.
Yeah, it's great that ecosystem is vibrant enough now that that's you essentially have lots and lots of nodes that are feeding you information that you need, right? So I'll enter interview with one question. Is there a particular innovation, cool piece of tech, different process, or something that you've seen in the last couple of years or that is about to come out that you just think is super cool that's not really related to DevResults in any way?
Just in general, like not
yeah,
really.
You're out there, maybe a client said something to you, or you saw a project, you're like, wow, I've never seen that implementation before.
I think that most of what's really going to rock this world of basically managing development projects is all kind of old hat outside
Sure.
this world, like just kind of getting up to sort of best practices in the, say in the chain of convenience store world. Like that would be, that would be revolutionary, frankly, to get to the point where we had that kind of freely flowing information, where we had that kind of live data feed available to managers so that they can actually make decisions with better information. That would completely transform the world of development, and it will. But it's really nothing sexier than mobile devices collecting data, feeding into databases, and then having this single source of truth with an organization where you can go to say, okay, well, what's going on with this project? How many widgets did we make last month? What are the challenges that we have here? These are things that all organizations struggle with, but the solutions are very not sexy. They're just, it's just basically taking this technology that's out there that we know how to use and just figuring out what the obstacles are to using these things. I mean, really, frankly, just the technology of the database, or even just the technology of a table with very well-defined fields and numeric data formats and date formats and all of that. If we could just get information to flow in that format from the point of service to all of the people who can use that information to make better decisions, that would be a huge win right there. Just keep your numbers separate from your text, and I'll be happy. That would be a really dramatic innovation in this field. It would make me really happy.
Herb, thanks so much for your time today. This has been a fun conversation, and I wish you all the best.
You bet. Thanks so much, dude.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from Aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.